unlimited drama series.
I walked through my front door expecting the usual chaos of a Tuesday evening. Daughters sprawled across the couch with homework, wife Lila yelling about dinner from the kitchen, maybe the dog barking at nothing. Instead, I found a goddamn tribunal waiting for me in my own living room. They were all there, sitting in a perfect semicircle like some twisted family therapy session. Lila perched on the edge of the couch, her yoga-toned arms crossed, blonde hair pulled back in that severe bun she wore when she meant business. My daughters Mia and Bella flanked her, 16 and 14 respectively, both avoiding eye contact with me. My mother Evelyn sat in my favorite recliner, my chair, her gray hair perfectly styled, lips pursed in that expression I'd known since childhood meant trouble. And there, leaning casually against the fireplace mantel like he owned the place, was my older brother Steve. The silence stretched for about 10 seconds before my youngest daughter Bella cleared her throat. "Dad, you need to sit down," she said, her voice shaky but determined. "We need to talk." I stayed standing, setting my toolbox down with a deliberate thud. After 12 hours of managing my construction crew, dealing with permit delays, and arguing with suppliers, the last thing I wanted was whatever this was shaping up to be. "Talk about what?" I asked, letting my eyes sweep across their faces. Steve was the only one who met my gaze, and something in his expression made my stomach tighten. Mia spoke up next, her voice steadier than her sister's. "Dad, you need to accept a new reality. You're not in charge of this family anymore." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my jaw clench, my hands curl into fists at my sides. "Excuse me? Jack, please sit down," Lila said, her voice dripping with that fake concern she'd perfected over the years. "We're all here because we care about you." "Care about me?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "This feels more like an ambush." Steve pushed off from the mantel, his expensive suit immaculate despite the late hour. My brother had always been the golden child, the one with the college degree, the financial advisor job, the perfect credit score. Everything I wasn't, according to my family. "Jack, we've been talking," Steve said, his voice smooth and reasonable. "About the kids, about Lila, about what's best for everyone." "What's best for everyone," I repeated slowly. "And what exactly would that be?" Mia looked at her mother, then back at me. "Uncle Steve is more like a father to us now, Dad. He's the one who helps with homework, who comes to our school events, who actually listens when we talk." The words were like a knife twisting in my chest. I thought about all the soccer games I'd missed because of work, all the parent-teacher conferences, where I'd shown up covered in sawdust and paint, all the times I'd been too tired to help with algebra or history projects. "I work 60 hours a week to pay for this house, your clothes, your phones, your everything," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "I'm sorry if that doesn't leave me time to be the perfect suburban dad." "It's not about being perfect," Lila interjected. "It's about being present. Steve has been more of a partner to me in the last 6 months than you've been in 6 years. Partner." The word hung in the air like smoke, and suddenly everything clicked into place. The way Steve had been coming around more often, always with some excuse about helping with the yard work or fixing something. The way Leela had started dressing up even for trips to the grocery store. The way my daughters had begun looking at me like I was a stranger in my own home. "A partner," I said quietly. "Is that what we're calling it?" My mother finally spoke up, her voice sharp with disapproval. "Jack, you're being dramatic. Steve has been nothing but helpful to this family while you've been buried in your work." "Helpful?" I nodded slowly, feeling something cold and hard settling in my chest. "Right." I looked around the room one more time, taking in their faces. Leela's fake sympathy, Steve's smug satisfaction, my daughter's confused loyalty, my mother's disappointment. They'd already made their decision. This wasn't a conversation, it was a verdict. "You know what?" I said, picking up my toolbox. "I think I'll pass on this little family meeting." "Jack, don't walk away," Leela called after me. "We need to work this out like adults." I stopped at the front door and turned back. "Adults? You want to handle this like adults? Fine. But next time you want to stage an intervention, maybe don't do it in the house I pay for." I walked out, closing the door quietly behind me. The evening air was cool against my face, and I stood on my own front porch feeling like a stranger. Through the window, I could see them already huddling together, probably discussing how unreasonable I was being, how this just proved their point about my inability to communicate. I got in my truck and drove to Pete's house. Pete Morrison had been my best friend since high school, the only person who'd stuck by me through my divorce from my first wife, through starting my construction business, through all the ups and downs of the last 20 years. He took one look at my face when he opened the door and stepped aside to let me in. "What happened?" he asked, handing me a beer from his fridge. I told him everything, from the moment I walked through my front door to the moment I walked out. Pete listened without interrupting, his weathered face growing more serious with each detail. "So they basically told you that Steve's the new man of the house," he said when I finished. "Pretty much. And Lila called him her partner." "Yep." Pete was quiet for a long moment, peeling the label off his beer bottle. "Jack, I've been wondering when you were going to figure it out." I looked at him sharply. "Figure what out? Your wife's been having an affair with your brother for months, man. I thought you knew and were just choosing to ignore it." The words hit me like a physical blow. Even though some part of me had suspected, hearing it said out loud made it real in a way that left me breathless. "How long have you known?" I asked. "I saw them together at that restaurant downtown about 3 months ago." They weren't exactly being subtle, holding hands across the table, her laughing at everything he said. "I figured you had to know." I set my beer down, my hands shaking slightly. "I didn't know. I mean, I suspected something was off, but I thought maybe she was just, I don't know, going through something." "I'm sorry, Jack. I should have said something sooner." "No," I said, standing up. "You did right. This is something I needed to see for myself." I drove home around midnight, expecting the house to be dark and quiet. Instead, I found Steve's Mercedes still parked in my driveway, and lights on in the living room. I sat in my truck for a few minutes, watching the shadows move behind the curtains, and felt something dark and cold settle in my chest. Tomorrow, I decided, things were going to change. The next morning, I woke up on Pete's couch with a crick in my neck and the taste of stale beer in my mouth. My phone showed 118 missed calls, most from Lila, some from my mother, a few from the girls. I deleted them all without listening to the voicemails. Pete was already up, making coffee in his kitchen when I stumbled in. "You look like hell," he said, handing me a mug. "Feel worse." I sat down at his kitchen table and rubbed my temples. "I need to know exactly what's been going on in my house." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I need evidence. If Lila's been cheating with Steve, there has to be proof somewhere." Pete sat down across from me, his expression serious. "Jack, what are you planning to do?" "I don't know yet, but I'm not going to let them make me out to be the villain in this story. Not when they're the ones who've been lying and sneaking around behind my back." After coffee and a shower at Pete's place, I drove to my house. Steve's car was gone, and Lila's yoga studio didn't open until 10, which meant she'd probably still be home. I needed to get into the house and look around without her knowing. I used my key quietly, listening for sounds of movement. The house was silent, and I could see through the kitchen window that Lila's car wasn't in the garage. Perfect. I went straight to our bedroom and started with her nightstand. Nothing unusual, just the typical collection of hand lotion, reading glasses, and romance novels. But when I opened her laptop, I hit the jackpot. She'd left her email open, and right there at the top of her inbox was a message from Steve with the subject line, "Last night was incredible." My hands were shaking as I clicked on it. "Lila, I can't stop thinking about you. The way you looked at me during dinner, the way you touched my hand when Jack wasn't looking. I know we agreed to take things slow, but I'm falling in love with you. We can't keep pretending this is just physical. Steve." I scrolled down through their email chain, my stomach churning with each message. They'd been carrying on for at least 4 months, maybe longer. The emails started innocent enough. Steve offering to help with household repairs, Lila thanking him for being so supportive during what she called a difficult time in my marriage. But they quickly escalated. By the second week, they were talking about meeting for coffee. By the third week, coffee had turned into lunch. By the fourth week, lunch had turned into afternoon visits to Steve's condo, while I was at work and the girls were at school. The most recent emails were explicit enough to make me feel sick. Detailed descriptions of what they'd done in my bed, in my shower, on my couch, plans for future encounters, discussions about how to handle the Jack situation. In one particularly damning message from 2 weeks ago, Lila had written, "I think it's time we told him." The girls already see you as more of a father figure than they see Jack, And honestly, Steve, you're everything he's not. Sophisticated, successful, emotionally available. Jack will never change. He'll always be that blue-collar guy who thinks working with his hands is enough to keep a family together. Steve's response had been even worse. You're right, but we need to be strategic about this. Jack has a temper, and he's stronger than both of us. We need to make sure the girls and your mother-in-law are on our side first. Once we have them convinced that I'm the better choice for this family, Jack won't have any choice but to accept the situation. I printed out every email, my hands shaking with rage. Then I went through her phone, which she'd left charging on the kitchen counter. More of the same. Text messages, photos, even a few videos that made me want to put my fist through the wall. But it was the photos that really got to me. Pictures of Steve in my house, wearing my apron while cooking dinner for my family. Pictures of him helping Mia with homework at my kitchen table. Pictures of him and Layla together at the girls' school events. Events where I'd been working late, trusting my brother to represent our family. There was even a selfie of Steve and Lila in my bed, both of them naked and grinning at the camera. The timestamp showed it had been taken last Tuesday afternoon, while I'd been dealing with a crisis at a job site. I forwarded everything to my own email, then deleted the sent messages from her phone. Let her wonder how I'd found out. By the time I heard her car in the driveway, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a stack of printed emails, waiting. She walked in through the garage door, yoga mat slung over her shoulder, looking relaxed and happy until she saw me. Jack, she said, her voice carefully neutral. I thought you were staying at Pete's. Change of plans, I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. Sit down, Lila. We need to talk. She stayed standing, her eyes flicking to the papers in front of me. What are those? Your love letters, I said calmly. All of them. 4 months' worth of emails and text messages between you and my brother. Very romantic stuff. Very detailed. The color drained from her face, but to her credit, she didn't try to deny it. Instead, she set down her yoga mat and crossed her arms. How did you get into my email? You left your laptop open, sloppy, for someone who's supposed to be conducting a secret affair. She sat down slowly, her yoga instructor composure starting to crack. Jack, I can explain. Explain what? How you've been screwing my brother in our bed? How you've been turning my daughters against me? How you and Steve have been planning to push me out of my own family? It's not like that. No? I picked up one of the printed emails and read aloud. Steve, I can't wait until we don't have to sneak around anymore. Jack is so clueless. He actually thanked you last week for being such a good brother. If he only knew that his good brother has been making me come 3 times a day in the bed Jack pays for. Lila flinched as if I'd slapped her. Jack, please, please what? Please pretend I didn't see this? Please go along with your little plan to make Steve the new head of household? I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper. Tell me, Leela, was last night's family meeting your idea or his? She didn't answer, but the guilt written across her face was answer enough. Here's what's going to happen, I said, standing up and gathering the papers. You're going to call Steve and tell him that I know everything. You're going to tell the girls that their perfect Uncle Steve has been lying to them. And you're going to start looking for a new place to live. Jack, you can't just throw me out. This is my home too. Is it? Because according to these emails, you've already been planning to leave me for Steve. Something about his condo being so much nicer than our tacky suburban house. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. I never meant for it to happen this way. Steve and I just connected, and you've been so distant lately. Don't. I held up a hand. Don't you dare try to make this my fault. You made a choice, Leela. You chose to betray your husband with his own brother. You chose to turn my children against me. You chose to plan my humiliation in my own living room. Those were your choices. I walked toward the door, then turned back. Oh, and Leela? You might want to change your passwords. You never know who might be reading your email. I left her sitting at the kitchen table, sobbing into her hands, and drove back to Pete's house. I had work to do. Over the next week, I played it cool. I went to work every day, came home for dinner, helped the girls with homework when they'd let me. I was polite to Leela, civil to Steve when he came around, respectful to my mother. But inside, I was planning. The first phase was information gathering. I installed a GPS tracker on Steve's Mercedes, the kind contractors use to keep track of company vehicles. I set up a camera in my garage that had a clear view of the driveway. I started paying attention to patterns, schedules, routines. What I discovered made my blood boil. Steve was coming to my house almost every day while I was at work. He'd arrive around noon, stay for 2 or 3 hours, then leave before the girls got home from school. On Wednesdays, when Leela's yoga studio was closed, they'd spend the entire afternoon together. But it wasn't just the affair that got to me. It was the way he'd made himself at home in my house. The GPS tracker showed that he was stopping at the grocery store before coming over, buying food with my family's grocery list. The camera caught him mowing my lawn, washing my wife's car, playing basketball with my daughters in the driveway. He was systematically replacing me in my own life. The breaking point came on a Friday afternoon. I'd left work early to pick up materials for a weekend project, and I decided to swing by the house to grab my good measuring tape. Steve's car was in the driveway, and through the living room window, I could see him and Lila on the couch. They weren't just having sex. They were cuddling, talking, laughing together like a real couple. Like they belonged there, and I was the intruder. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, watching them through the window, feeling something cold and hard crystallize in my chest. Then I drove to Lila's yoga studio. Monica and Jasmine, Lila's two closest friends and business partners, were there setting up for the evening.
I cheated on you with your brother. What's wrong?
I will not forgive you for this!
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
Classes. I'd known them for years. They'd been to barbecues at my house, birthday parties for my daughters, holiday gatherings. They'd always been friendly to me, treating me like part of their extended yoga family. "Jack," Monica said brightly when I walked in. "What brings you here? Lila's not here today." "I know where Lila is," I said quietly. "She's at home with my brother." The smile faded from Monica's face. Jasmine stopped arranging yoga blocks and turned to stare at me. "What do you mean?" Jasmine asked. I pulled out my phone and showed them one of the photos I'd found. Steve and Lila kissing in my kitchen, taken 3 days ago according to the timestamp. I mean, my wife has been having an affair with my brother for 4 months, and apparently everyone knew about it except me. Monica's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, Jack, we had no idea." "Didn't you?" Because according to the emails I found, Lila's been telling Steve all about her conversations with you two, about how you've been encouraging her to follow her heart and not settle for a marriage that doesn't fulfill her. The two women exchanged glances, and I could see the guilt written across their faces. "Jack, we never told her to have an affair," Jasmine said weakly. "Maybe not in those exact words, but you knew she was unhappy, and instead of suggesting marriage counseling or honest conversation, you told her she deserved better. You helped her justify what she was doing." "That's not fair," Monica protested. "We're her friends. We were trying to be supportive." "Supportive of what? Adultery? Betrayal? Destroying a family?" I put my phone away and looked around the studio. At the inspirational posters on the walls, the crystals and candles, the whole carefully constructed atmosphere of peace and enlightenment. "You know what's funny?" I said. "All this talk about mindfulness and living authentically, and none of you had the courage to tell me that my wife was cheating on me with my own brother." "Jack, please," Monica said. "Don't do anything you'll regret." "Regret?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The only thing I regret is trusting people who smiled to my face while helping to destroy my marriage behind my back." I walked toward the door, then turned back. "Oh, and ladies, you might want to find a new business partner. Because when this all comes out, and it will come out, nobody in this town is going to want to take yoga classes from someone who helps married women cheat on their husbands." That evening, I got home to find another family meeting in progress. This time, Pete was there too, sitting uncomfortably on the edge of the couch, while Lila, Steve, my mother, and the girls formed their usual tribunal. "Jack," Lila said as I walked in, "we need to talk about your behavior today." "My behavior?" Monica called me. She said you went to the studio and made some very serious accusations. I looked around the room, taking in their faces. Pete looked apologetic. Clearly, he'd been ambushed just like I had been the week before. Steve looked smug and confident. My mother looked disappointed. The girls looked confused and upset. "Accusations?" I said calmly. "Is that what we're calling the truth now?" "Jack, please," my mother said. "There's no need for this kind of drama." "Drama?" I pulled out my phone and opened one of the videos I'd found on Lila's phone. "Mom, would you like to see some real drama? This is a video of your golden child, Steve, having sex with my wife in my bed." "Jack!" Lila shrieked, lunging for my phone. I held it out of her reach. "What's wrong, Lila? Ashamed of your artistic work?" Steve stood up, his face flushed with anger. "That's enough, Jack. You're out of line." I'm out of line? I laughed. Steve, you've been screwing my wife for 4 months, turning my kids against me, and planning to take over my family. And I'm the one who's out of line? Dad, stop, Mia said, tears streaming down her face. Just stop. Stop what, sweetheart? Stop telling the truth? Stop defending myself? Stop fighting for my own family. This is exactly why we needed to have this intervention, Lila said, her voice shaking. Look at how you're acting, Jack. You're scaring the girls. I'm scaring them? What about Uncle Steve, who's been lying to them for months? What about their mother, who's been betraying their father? What about their grandmother, who knew about the affair and said nothing? My mother's face went white. Jack, You never what, Mom? Never knew? Pete figured it out in one afternoon. You've been coming to this house twice a week for 4 months, and you never noticed that Steve's car was here an awful lot? You never wondered why Lila was suddenly so happy? You never questioned why the girls started talking about Steve like he was their real father? The room fell silent, except for the sound of Bella crying softly. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice deadly calm. Steve, you're going to get out of my house and stay out. Lila, you're going to tell the girls the truth about what you've been doing. Mom, you're going to decide whether you want a relationship with your son or your son's cheating wife, because you can't have both. Jack, you can't give us ultimatums, Steve said. Watch me. I turned to Pete. Sorry you got dragged into this, man. Want to grab a beer? Pete stood up immediately. Yeah, let's go. As we headed for the door, Lila called after us. Jack, if you walk out that door, don't bother coming back. I stopped and turned around one more time. Lila, I built this house with my own hands. I paid for every stick of furniture, every appliance, every blade of grass in the yard. You want me out? You're going to have to do better than an affair and a family intervention. Pete and I went to the Anchor, the dive bar where most of the local contractors hung out after work. Within an hour, half the town knew that Lila Carter was cheating on her husband with his own brother. By morning, the story would be everywhere. The next 2 weeks were a blur of lawyers, accusations, and small-town gossip. Lila filed for divorce, claiming I was emotionally abusive and mentally unstable. I counterfiled with evidence of adultery and demanded full custody of the girls. Steve tried to play peacemaker, suggesting family counseling and mediation. I told him exactly where he could stick his suggestions. My mother chose sides, the wrong ones. She moved in with Steve temporarily, claiming she was helping the family heal. What she was really doing was providing cover for the affair, giving them a veneer of respectability. The girls were caught in the middle, confused and angry. Mia blamed me for destroying the family. Bella just cried a lot and asked why everyone was so mad all the time. But the real blow came when I found out about the money. I was going through financial records for the divorce proceedings when I noticed some irregularities in our joint accounts. Money missing, transfers I didn't remember authorizing, credit cards I hadn't applied for. It took 3 days of detective work, but I finally figured out what had been happening. Steve, with his financial advisor credentials and Lila's forged signatures, had been systematically draining our accounts and taking out loans in my name. Over the course of 4 months, they'd stolen nearly $50,000 from me. Money I'd saved for the girls' college funds, for home improvements, for our future. They'd used it to fund their affair, expensive hotels, weekend trips, jewelry for Lila that I'd assumed she'd bought herself. When I confronted them with the evidence, Steve had the balls to claim it was a loan. I was helping Lila become financially independent, he said, sitting in my lawyer's office like he was doing me a favor. She needed her own money for when you two separated. You mean when you convinced her to leave me for you? I corrected. Jack, your marriage was already over. Lila was miserable. I just helped her see that she had options. Options that included stealing my money and forging my signature on loan documents. It's not stealing if it's marital property. I looked at my lawyer, Miss Brandt, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, who specialized in messy divorces. She nodded slightly. We had them dead to rights on the financial fraud, but Steve wasn't done. Besides, Jack, let's be honest about what this is really about. You're angry because Lila chose someone better. Someone who can actually provide for her emotionally and financially. Financially, I laughed. Steve, you're a financial advisor who makes $60,000 a year. I own a construction company that cleared $200,000 last year. The only way you can provide for her financially is by stealing from me. I make more than $60,000. No, you don't. I slid a folder across the table. I hired a private investigator to look into your finances. You're broke, Steve. You've got $40,000 in credit card debt. Your condo is 3 months behind on payments, and your car is about to be repossessed. That's why you needed my money, isn't it? You were trying to impress Lila with a lifestyle you couldn't afford. Steve's face went red, then white. Lila stared at him in shock. That's not... I had some temporary cash flow issues, but nothing, I interrupted. You're a fraud, Steve. You've been living beyond your means for years, and when you saw an opportunity to steal from your own brother to fund your affair, you took it. The meeting ended with Steve and Lila storming out, but the damage was done. Within days, the financial fraud evidence was filed with the court and criminal charges were pending. But I wasn't done with them yet. The next phase of my plan required patience and careful timing. I waited until the weekend of the annual Founders' Day festival, when the whole town would be gathered in the square for food, music, and community celebration. Steve had volunteered to give a presentation about financial planning for families. Ironic, considering his own financial situation and recent criminal charges. He was scheduled to speak at 2 o'clock, right after the mayor's welcome address. I made sure to be there early, setting up my own little display at a table near the main stage. I'd printed out copies of the emails between Steve and Lila, bank records showing the stolen money, and photos of them together in my house. Everything was organized in neat folders, with labels like evidence of adultery, financial fraud documentation, and timeline of betrayal. At exactly 2 o'clock, as Steve took the microphone to begin his presentation on building financial trust in your family, I stood up. Before Steve talks about financial trust, I called out loudly. Maybe he should explain why he's been stealing money from his own brother to fund an affair with his brother's wife. The crowd went silent. Steve froze at the microphone, his face draining of color. "Jack, please," he said into the microphone. "This isn't the time or place, isn't it?" I walked toward the stage, holding up one of the printed emails. "This is a public forum about financial trust, and you're a financial advisor who's been committing fraud. Seems like exactly the right time and place to me." I turned to address the crowd, which had grown larger as people realized something dramatic was happening. "My name is Jack Carter," I said loudly. "Some of you know me. I own Carter Construction. I've lived in this town for 15 years. I've built half the houses on Elm Street. What you might not know is that my brother Steve and my wife Leela have been having an affair for 4 months." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. I could see Lila pushing through the people, trying to get to the stage, her face bright red with humiliation. "But that's not the worst part," I continued. "The worst part is that Steve, who you're about to trust with advice about your family's financial future, has been stealing money from my accounts to pay for hotel rooms and jewelry for his mistress." "Jack, stop!" Lila had reached the front of the crowd and was trying to climb onto the stage. "Stop what, Lila? Stop telling the truth?" I held up a bank statement. $50,000, stolen over 4 months, forged signatures, unauthorized loans, credit cards taken out in my name, all to fund their little love affair. Steve had backed away from the microphone, but I could see the mayor approaching from the side of the stage, clearly intending to shut down my impromptu presentation. I had maybe 30 more seconds before they cut me off. "The point is," I said, raising my voice to carry over the growing murmur of the crowd, "when someone will steal from their own family, lie to their own brother, and betray the people who trust them most, you probably shouldn't trust them with your retirement savings." The mayor reached me just as I finished, but it was too late. The damage was done. Steve's reputation in town was destroyed. Lila was sobbing with humiliation, and half the crowd was already pulling out their phones to call friends and family with the gossip. As security escorted me away from the stage, I caught sight of my daughters in the crowd. Mia looked horrified, but Bella was staring at her mother and uncle, with something that looked like understanding finally dawning in her eyes. That night, Steve left town. He packed up his condo and drove away without telling anyone where he was going. The criminal charges would follow him wherever he went, but at least he was out of my life. Leela lasted another week before she cracked under the pressure of being the town pariah. She moved back to her mother's house in Ohio, leaving the girls with me. My mother came by the house a few days later, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen her. "I owe you an apology," she said, standing awkwardly in my living room. "Yes, you do. I thought maybe if Steve and Leela were happy together, and if the girls were happy, then maybe it would work out for everyone. I didn't realize about the money or how much they'd been manipulating the situation. Mom, they lied to everyone, including you. Steve's been broke for years, and Leela's been planning to leave me since before the affair even started. They used you, just like they used me." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "Can you forgive me?" I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and saw a lonely old woman who'd been taken in by a smooth-talking son and a manipulative daughter-in-law. She'd made terrible choices, but she'd been a victim too, in her way. "Yeah, Mom. I can forgive you, but it's going to take time to trust you again. I understand." She left, and I was alone in my house with my two daughters, who were finally starting to understand what had really been happening in their family. It took months of family counseling, honest conversations, and patience, but eventually, we started to heal. Mia apologized for choosing sides without knowing all the facts. Bella stopped crying all the time and started talking to me again about school, friends, and her dreams for the future. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. I kept the house, got full custody of the girls, and Leela was ordered to pay restitution for the stolen money, though I doubted I'd ever see most of it. Steve never came back to town. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd declared bankruptcy and was working at a car dealership somewhere in Florida. The criminal charges had been dropped in exchange for full restitution, but his career as a financial advisor was over. Lila tried to maintain a relationship with the girls through phone calls and occasional visits, but it was strained. They'd lost respect for her, and trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. As for me, I learned to be both mother and father to my daughters. I learned to help with homework and attend school events and listen when they needed to talk. I learned that being present was more important than being perfect, and that love without honesty is just manipulation. The family audit was complete. Some relationships had been lost forever, but the ones that remained were stronger and more authentic than they'd ever been before. And sometimes, that's the best you can hope for.